Here today on the Instones podcast is one of my lifelong dear friends, Amy Guzzi.
Hi.
Amy is a wildly successful fashion influencer who started her journey with that in New York City, which is where I met her as a mom, and has evolved into an entire brand, including but not limited to a newly launched clothing line called the Llewellyn.
Llewellyn, yeah.
Llewellyn. And Amy, thank you for being here. This feels so to have you here, right? This is like, because we have known each other through a lot of evolutions of ourselves.
Yes, that is very true.
I'm going to give the short story about how we met. So Amy's oldest son, Joey, and my oldest daughter, Morgan, were both born months apart, weeks apart. And I went to a breastfeeding support group in the Upper West Side.
Upper Breast Side, it was called.
Upper Breast Side. I hope they still exist. And I was bringing in my Cabbage Patch fat little baby that I thought wasn't nursing properly. And Amy had just had Joey. And I remember thinking, oh, she has her mom here with her. And you were just like, he doesn't latch.
I know. And it was like a blizzard outside.
It was a blizzard outside. Yeah, it was definitely a blizzard.
So Joey was 10 pounds, so he was huge. And
forgot about that.
He was like losing weight. And I was like, and you know, they were like so crazy about breastfeeding, which is just a whole nother can of worms. But so much pressure to put on yourself. And he literally never latched on. So I marched there like in hysteria in a blizzard.
In that green Vista stroller.
And I was like, please help me. If I give my baby formula, he's going to die.
And then we realized that was the least of our issues.
Yes, that was the least of our issues.
So I never even really met Amy that day. I remember her from that circle of nursing moms. And weeks later, as the weather broke in New York and it became spring, I was walking through Central Park and I see this beautiful brunette on a bench. And she says, hi, were you the girl at the Upper Breast Side? And I said, yeah. And she said, you said, how are you? And I said, terrible. I'm terrible. This is awful.
I remember being like, I vividly remember saying to you, how did you lose all the baby weight? Because you were so skinny.
I was so
and
skinny.
I still hadn't lost it. And you were like, I had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah, this is so unhealthy. Like I am riddled with postpartum anxiety. And like, this is so not how I ever envisioned motherhood to be. And you said, me neither. It's awful. And I remember being like, I love the realness of you. And just like, we basically had no understanding of our histories with each other. We only had this like motherhood is awful thing. No. And if anything, I think, and then you sharing, I see this woman at NYU Women's Health that specializes in women's health postpartum. You should see her. And I was like, yeah, like, give me the name and number. And I worked with her next week, and it really much started my journey of understanding myself and postpartum / like really, really realizing now that it was like postpartum psychosis. I mean, I was deep in it. And you were, as I say, like one of my little angels that helped pull me out of that because of how you shared. And I think that one of the best parts about you, and I'll brag on all levels, is that you are very vulnerable about how you live your life and what feels good for you to be a better you. And I think that you shared that with me so just honestly. And I was like, yeah, why would I be struggling? Like, let's try to go figure myself out.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's what connects us as human beings is compassion and vulnerability. And obviously there's no such thing as a perfect life. So when you portray that you have a perfect life, it makes it very difficult for people to connect to you. And
totally.
So yes, it's so funny because you were talking about all the other, and the only person I remember from that breastfeeding class was you. I remember looking over, you had like the same haircut as me right now.
Yeah, I totally did.
And then just to think that like, and I just remember looking at you like this beautiful girl, she has it all together because your hair was done. And Morgan was a little older than Joey. So you weren't like,
she was 11 weeks old. I didn't have help. I was in it already. I had been, yeah, I mean, it's every week you feel better at it, even though I was dying inside.
Yeah, I know.
But anyways, I share that story because that's probably why, and it is why, not maybe why, it is why we became such fast friends and leaned into motherhood together. And you and I really became friends due to our journey of first-time motherhood.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, Sarah, I mean, I know it's probably extreme to say you were like a lifeline, but you were like my first mom friend at a very, dark time in my life. And that is like, that's huge.
Yeah. I mean, we would
When
both
we
look
got
at each
together,
other.
we were like inseparable for a while, when we lived a block, it was like,
It was a
and
block away.
I
And
look back on it now, and obviously, but I look back on it, I'm like, how did I find that life stressful? Do you ever look back?
I know.
And then, like, he slept all day. I mean, he slept all day.
Took the longest naps, and you were like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. He just keeps sleeping. And then all he ate was pirate
I
booty.
was like so overwhelmed.
Right. And I think it's like anything. You only know what you know.
Yeah.
And we only knew that. And that's why I think you and I as mothers, like, I don't ever look at new mothers and think, my God, like they got to pull their shit together. I'm like, no, that was hard. That was really hard.
Definitely was hard. I think I just was so scared to keep something alive.
Yes. Yeah, I was too.
Just
Someone.
It was like, I have to keep this thing alive for the next 18 years.
Again, this was like, we became friends in like the winter, and then we were going through these seasons too of like budging our way while our spouses were at work on Wall Street, and we were very alone and isolated in that sense. And so, and while you had parents that were close and nearby, like because you live in apartments in New York, like doesn't like, oh, I just lounge with the baby outside for a bit. It doesn't happen like that. We were blessed to be able to find each other and find a home in that.
Yes, 100%.
But I want to go on and talk about how I think that your personality and beginning as Joey got older, and you really decided. I mean, you had always had this penchant for fashion and jewelry, and I mean, wasn't your first babysitter the girl from the jewelry shop on like 70th?
Yes, yeah. Because I would go there all the time.
You'd go there all the time, and you loved it. And I remember when you said, you're like, I'm going to start a blog about fashion. I thought, how cool, like that you're just going to lean in on it. And you did and never stopped. And that's what we were talking about before we pressed record here, is like, you just kept moving with it and you allowed yourself to evolve. And it's one of the coolest things about you, I think, is that you have leaned into the evolution, whether you have been scared or nervous, and have let it evolve. And it's awesome. It's the coolest thing.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that personally for me was the hardest part about becoming a mother was like losing myself and losing my identity. And so, back when Joey was born in 2013, it was sort of like all the pioneer bloggers, like Something Navy, the Blonde Salad, like Kiara Fury Company, like all of them were just like coming out. And I was like, I could do this too. And I hired the girl that worked at the jewelry store who was a FIT student to be my photographer. I convinced my husband to like buy me this really nice camera. And I was taking all these street style pictures in the city. And for me, it just gave me like a purpose, a reason to get dressed every day. Like it was like another lifeline for me. And I also loved to write. So the first blog that I had was Joey and the Owl. And that was really like a combination of fashion and motherhood. And honestly, I did a fashion podcast yesterday, and I actually said that as well. I mean, I don't look at life as having regrets. I think, everything happens for a reason. But one of my biggest regrets was that when I moved here and I was pregnant with Caroline, and I moved to Connecticut, and I was pregnant with Caroline, I just like didn't feel well. I had this like little boy, toddler who was all over the place. And I was like, I'm just going to stop with the blog. And I came back, like say 3 or 4 years later when, I had a better grip on my 2 little kids, and, Instagram was like so oversaturated, like with so many fashion bloggers or this or that. So, I mean, like I said, that's a regret I have. I don't know if I would necessarily use the word regret, because I think that I came back and I was older and more confident and in a better headspace to tackle it the way it was supposed to be. And, so I don't have any regrets, but there were so many people who, started since I had, stopped.
Well, it's funny, Amy, I don't even think about that. I actually, if I had to write your story as a close friend of yours, I would never have thought, I actually think I forgot that you even pressed pause. which I think is maybe a good lesson in that we're so hard on ourselves for when we press pause, but the world's not seeing that. The world just sees you jump back in.
Yeah. I mean,
because I don't think about that at all. Like there's never, what the world thinks of you and what you think of what we think of ourselves is oftentimes two very different things.
100%. And, my husband always says this, which like could sound like rude, but he's always like, Amy, you're not that important.
We're not that important.
And I think that like when you put yourself out there all the time, because you're constantly thinking about it and you're constantly judging yourself, that nobody's like Amy wore the wrong boots in that.
Exactly. No one.
For 2000,
no one.
23, those boots are really bad.
Yeah.
Like, no one's harder on ourselves than we are. And really, I think that's the thing that so many people struggle with if they were ever to do with what I do is like, people just think that, and listen, it does come with a lot of people being rude and saying mean things. And there's a whole, Reddit page about Connecticut influencers, and I'm definitely on it. But, I mean,
get a life.
I know, get a life.
Respectfully get a life.
Respectfully get a life. And like, I wouldn't have been able to do this when I was 25. But nobody's thinking about you as much as you're thinking about yourself.
No one's thinking. 100%. Yeah, I agree. It goes back to what I always say is the vulnerability thing. It takes a lot to be this vulnerable and put yourself out there so much on a project or passion that you feel so deeply aligned with to help others. I think women, we are wired to tend and befriend. We are wired to create communities and, help other women and mothers. And that's like an innate part, I think, of what you do, which is to have women feel and look their best selves. And because of your talent in curating that, you get to have this platform. And even I sometimes think like, oh, I don't want to look at myself again. I don't want to do another front-facing video.
100%.
You get sick of it. At the same time, I realize that no one's thinking about me and doing a front-facing reel more than I am at all.
Exactly. My friend Kat can cook. You have to meet one day. She's amazing. She once said, if you look at it like you're providing a service for someone, it takes the ego out of it.
Yep. The ego's the enemy in it. You are like, what service, what am I giving back to someone? Like, I think if someone, for me, if a special needs mom decides to try out a new park or go on an airplane ride because of the content that I share, that's all I want. I'm so proud of that person. Like, that is so freaking great.
That's what makes you so beautiful, Sarah.
And I'm sure you feel parallel in that, like, if someone writes to you, goes, Amy, I felt so good putting on the dress that you recommended. I never felt like that's all you want. Like, it's so satisfying. And I think to your point that your friend Kat makes is that we're in the ring. Like, we're doing it. We are in the ring. We are in the arena, and the critics on the outside, like, aren't in it. You can't listen to that noise and the critics in the peanut gallery because they're not in it. And I think that I've had some pretty hateful comments come to me saying that I'm, shame on me for pawning off my business because of my children. Shame on me for building a business around my children, special needs. And it's like, that says more about the person it's coming from versus me every day of the week.
100%. 100%.
Talk to me about Llewellyn and jumping into this whole new, like, it's a whole new platform for you. I mean, you went from really designing and cultivating and curating and styling to actually a line of clothing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just sort of wanted to evolve. I was like, I'm 45. I don't know if I want to be like posting outfits for the rest of my life on Instagram, even though I probably will.
Yeah.
But like, what was like the next step? And as being a stylist and being in so many closets, I saw there was a lack of well-made closet staples. And I think so many people think that like, quantity is better than quality, fast fashion. There's a huge push for sustainability now in fashion. And so I just wanted to come up with well-made closet staples. The first being like the traditional button down. That's just like a great closet staple that goes with so many bottoms. You can dress it up or down. And so, so I found a factory in Italy, and they make beautiful shirts by hand. And I mean, I started in April. It's going so well. I've been so far out of my comfort zone since it started. I literally
greatest lesson.
I know. And it's so funny because I think that, listen, social media has been a beautiful thing for me, and I think can be a beautiful thing for a lot of people. You know, it's definitely a double-edged sword, but you can really be whoever you want to be. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I transform yourself and do whatever I
Like with
wanted.
Llewellyn, it just evolved and you got to
Just
do
sort of
that.
like evolved, and you know, I started in April, and yeah, and so what I was saying is I think social media sometimes comes off as like everything's so perfect and easy, and everybody's like, oh my god, your clothing line looks like it's doing so well, and I'm flying to California tomorrow. I've had all these trunk shows, and it is, but like I still am up all night,
Of course. Of
like a nervous
course.
wreck.
Well, I think this is actually a great wing of a conversation to discuss because I feel, and I'm sure you feel this way, given, you know, we are a niche set of mothers, just the two of us. We lived in New York City for a long time. We are in the New York City metro area still, and the comparison game is real. It
Yeah,
is we are not living in a typical suburban part of the country. And I own that. We're very lucky, but there's a lot of quote unquote success around us all the time.
yeah,
And I think that in any capacity, when we think on failure or whatever that means, there's a lot of anxiety that goes around that because we're just in an area that is quote unquote so successful. And I mean, how do you balance that? Because I think you're right, like trying to not think of it as this perfection game at all and just doing, you know, not to be someone, but to do something.
yeah. I mean, listen, I like, you know, there's so many podcasts that I listen to, and like most of like 99.9% of the people that are successful will tell you all of their failures first.
Yep.
And I think that so many people think that people are successful overnight, or, you know, it's so easy to be like, they have so much, you know, this sort of thing. I also just think that, you know, like everything, money comes and goes,
Yep.
you know, everything, nothing is ever, you know, straightforward, all straight line all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think that, you know, it's very easy for people to compare themselves, but you know, I'm too busy to compare myself now. And I think that is, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I think I used to compare myself when I didn't feel good about myself.
Right.
And I feel like so confident now. I mean, trust me, like I said, I have bad days. I'm up at night, I
Yes.
worry, but
Yeah.
I am so confident in myself because I just keep showing up. I just keep doing it. And I just get more and more confident that it's almost like, you know, I think that the people that compare themselves, the people that are always talking about everybody, and, you know, we all have them in the suburbs. The only way that fulfills their soul is dragging other people down.
Right. And
And
they might not even realize they're doing it. I think sometimes half of the people that I think about in any town or any group of women or whatever, they don't even realize that they're doing it. And and it becomes this like dopamine hit grounded in something it's none of my business. Like I don't want to even get a high or a hit off of discussing others.
yeah, and I think that when you find something that you love and you're good at, and you build confidence that way, all that stuff sort of just goes away, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I recently woke up on a morning and I thought, wait a second, my day's full of things that I am so excited to do as Sarah to grow, you know, Saturday Story and to launch a podcast and all this stuff. And, you know, I have all these different people saying like, you got to write the book, you got to do this. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep doing the next right thing for me. I'm
Yeah,
just that.
listen, I think that like I grew success, like my success came when I was true to myself. And I mean, I know I'm comparing like fashion to your, you
It's all
know,
relative though, I think.
but I think that so many times I was like, I need to be trendy. I need to follow in this, you know, and like I mean, God, you want to play the comparison game. I mean, going on Instagram and seeing people's followings grow and likes growing, and I mean, all this, all the minutia. It's like it can be
Yeah.
surprising. But once I was true to like my true style and who I really was, that is when I really like flourished and grew,
Yeah.
because that is when, you know, when you're true to yourself, people see that. And that is like, you know, the
It doesn't
authentic.
come across. Yeah. It's like this sixth sense of people being drawn to you because they can just see that immediately. They can totally see
Yeah,
that
exactly. And
immediately.
I have like a very kind of traditional New England style because I grew up in New England.
Hmm.
And I always felt like, okay, especially when I lived in New York, like I had to be edgier, or I had to be trendier, or, And there's so many people that just like want to see what I love or who I am. And so that is when, when you truly just do what's best for you is when you kind of flourish.
So another question that's going to be off the cuff, but I'm going to talk about one thing that you posted, and it has nothing to do with fashion. It has to do with your parents and the viral video of your dad in the Christmas shoot from 2 years ago.
Yes.
Which is something that I make almost every person watch. It is like, I mean, like Hollywood couldn't write a better script on a parent trying to help their daughter and their influencing photo shoot.
Yes. So
you are very lucky to have the parents that you were raised. Do you feel like that is why you're so able to grow as you are? Or do you feel like that's more of like an innate thing about who Amy is?
Listen, I grew up with really wonderful parents, and they live with me now. So like I said, I'm leaving for California tomorrow to Saturday to go for a trunk show. And I feel very lucky that they are here to help me and give me support. But I also just think, my grandparents were immigrants from Italy. And my dad never took a risk in his life. He was the first one to go to college. He became a principal. And then I wanted to study fashion. He's like, I'm not paying for you to study fashion. My dad has saved every dollar. I mean, that's also that generation. They saved every dollar he ever made.
Yep.
And he only paid for like education.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so I wanted to study fashion. He was like, no. So I ended up getting a master's actually in special ed. But fashion
Which is another wild connection that we have.
I know, another wild. So when I am buying all these shirts and I see these invoices and, my cost of goods are very high, he like goes through another stratosphere. Like he is just like, wonder if not. And it's like, the thing is like, the mindset is everything, right? And so if you're like, I'm scared, I'm not going to sell them, which I do feel at times, it can be paralyzing. But then I'm like, what, I will not give up till I sell all of them. You know what I mean? I'm always in this struggle because like, I'm not wired to take risks because I wasn't brought up like that.
Right.
But then, so much has happened with podcasts, the internet, whatever, and you hear all these people's stories. I don't remember who it was. I want to say it was the CEO of JetBlue who was like either a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon, but I could be screwing this up, that said he became so successful because when he was a kid, he'd have to go to people's like doors and knock on them. You know how they do. And he's like, so many people slammed the door in my face. I got rejected so much. And that's like sort of what I was saying before, is like people just think that Rome was built overnight. And there's so many times that you have to fail. And nobody becomes uber successful by being scared of taking risks.
It's like so obvious, but then like it's so hard. Simple, it's not easy. It's a simple
concept. Like literally, if you want to sell all the shirts, you have to show up and sell all the shirts. You know what I mean? But it's so funny because my dad will still say to me, wonder if everybody gets a shirt, Amy. Nobody wants 2 shirts. Like he says these crazy things. And meanwhile, I have people that buy like 4 or 5 shirts at a time. They're like, I want one in every color.
Beautiful understanding for you that you can have that and have grown up like that and want something different. I struggle with that a lot too. I was raised like in a very simple home, and fashion and flashy New York and all these things were not a part at all of my upbringing. And yet I love living in New York when we did, and I love being so close to New York still. Like there are innate parts that like maybe aren't understood by family members or whatever, or the choices I've made. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
And I think leaning into what I love about, Llewellyn for you is that it is such a classic piece. And I always think, what problem am I solving in being Sarah of Saturday Story? And what problem are you solving being the founder of Llewellyn and a stylist? Like, you are reminding people that a good high quality piece, like a white crisp button down, can change effortlessly your day to day. I firmly believe that like,
it's like the most powerful thing you've probably ever said. But like, no, I mean, listen, I know this podcast is to talk about me or whatever, or, talk about a relationship. But I mean, Sarah, you have you have turned it all into such a beautiful thing.
it feels beautiful. There's a term, and I believe it's like Hebrew from the Israelis. It's en brera, which means there's no alternative. And for me, it echoes in the background for me all the time. Like, well, okay, what's the alternative here? The alternative is I isolate me and my children. We don't experience the world. We become more fearful. Like, I don't want that. So the alternative, which is no alternative, is to get out there and live.
Yeah. And just like it is easier for me to sit here and be scared about taking risks, it's just as easy to be like, how is this my life?
Totally. Totally.
And,
like, how is this my life?
So like, that's the parallel between like us is like, you know what? Like you just have to keep focusing your mind on
the next
positive.
right thing, focusing on the positive and doing the next right thing that makes you and your family the best version of themselves. You know, I was talking to someone who said, I just am shocked that you travel so much with your kids. And I'm like, well, that's how I grew up. My parents didn't have much, but they really put an emphasis on travel and seeing the world. And so that's innately who I am. And that doesn't mean that even my children who have level 2 autism, they are still part of a family lineage who likes to travel. And so I always think about that. Like, it's going to look a lot different, and we're probably not going to do it as much as a typical adventurous family would, but we still do it. And it doesn't mean we can't do it. We just have to lower our expectations to everything. Like, if someone told me right now, you have an all expense paid trip to Hong Kong with your kids, I'd be like, all right, like I could do it. I wouldn't even bat an eye. I'd be like, oh, do we have seats? Yeah, you have everything set up. You just gotta fly halfway across the world with all your kids. I'd be like, I can do it. And I like that about myself, because I feel like I can inject that mindset to other special needs parents, because we're not looking to fly halfway across the world. We're looking to try a new playground. We're looking to try a new pool. We're looking to go to Disney for a day. You can do it. It's just you've got to strip back all these limitations that you put on yourself about what it's supposed to look like, right? I end up having conversations with people, and then we're not isolated. We end up interacting with more people. And just for you too, like lean into what you love and you get to engage with the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, Sarah, that is amazing.
I love you to bits. You're the best. I love how much you are evolving. I love getting a front row seat to it. I love your family so much. I mean, our children have eaten a lot of Pirates booty. Our children have eaten a lot of Pirates booty. We should really be, Llewellyn should be sponsored by Pirates booty.
We've come a long way.
We have come a long way. And I'm just so glad that Connecticut and New Jersey aren't nearly as far away as we really worried they were going to be years ago.
I know, amen to that.
Well, Amy Guzzi, thank you for being here on the Insurance Podcast. I can't wait to celebrate each and every bit of you.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you too.